Very good evening and welcome to this 97th leadership conversation. I am obviously excited. I'm excited for a reason. Ms. Rama Bijapurkar is here with us, and I have been grinning like this for the whole month and eagerly waiting to host her. And she's here, my favorite on consumer behavior. Hugely admire you, ma'am. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us.
My pleasure entirely.
Hearty welcome in true sense.
Thank you.
What I will do now for the benefit of all the participants is to give a brief introduction of you and then hand it over back to you for your talk. Once again, I welcome all the participants. While you allow me to share the screen, I can see several leaders joining from academia, industry, those IMA alumni who have joined, some of them. I can see their names. So customer in the boardroom is the topic on which our leader, Ms. Rama Bijapurkar, is going to talk today. This intro and then talk and Q&A and sum up, that's about 1 hour we have factored in. Ms. Rama Bijapurkar is a recognized thought leader on market strategy and consumer behavior, as well as keen commentator on social and cultural change in India. Ms. Rama's core area of work is around bringing market focus and customer insight to business strategy and public policy through her research, writing, teaching, and work on various boards. Ms. Bijapurkar has spent over 2 decades teaching MBA students and offering executive education programs at the prestigious IIM Ahmedabad, formerly as visiting faculty and presently as Professor of Management Practice. She is also one of India's most experienced independent directors, having served on the boards of several of India's blue chip companies. Present boards include Mahindra & Mahindra Financial Services Limited, Cummins India, Apollo Hospitals Enterprises, Sun Pharma, all big names. Past boards served on include Infosys, ICFAI Bank, Axis Bank, Bharat Petroleum, National Payment Corporation of India, CRISIL, all again very, very big names. Past governing councils include entities like Banking Codes and Standards Board of India, Insurance Information Bureau, and IIM Ahmedabad itself. Other past professional activities and experience include Senior Fellow of MasterCard, Center for Inclusive Growth, and Fellow Member Eminent Person Advisory Group to the Competition Commission of India, and Fellow Center for Emerging Market Economies, Fletcher School. Previous work experience includes employment with the prestigious McKinsey & Company, MARG Marketing and Research Group, now Nielsen, and Mode Services, which is now called TNS India, followed by her own consulting practice from the year 2000. She has been a dominant voice in the media on business and policy issues in her areas of interest. She is the author of We Are Like That Only, Understanding the Logic of Consumer India. I read this book. A never before world tracking the evolution of consumer India. Customer in the Boardroom, I'm about to read. Partly I finished. Crafting customer-based business strategy. Of course, she holds a degree from BSc degree in physics from Delhi University and PG diploma in management from IIM Ahmedabad. She's based in Mumbai. She is currently with us here. I will save all the time for her. Over to you, ma'am. We are all ears. Once again, I welcome everyone. Please make notes and we will open mics for you whenever you have to ask questions. But first the talk, then cluster 1, and then cluster 2. In cluster 2, we'll open the mics. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you so much once again and welcome.
Wonderful. Namaste, everybody. Thank you for inviting me here, ICFAI. I really look forward to sharing some thoughts. This is a privilege indeed. I hope the questions will not be too hard. Do remember it's Friday evening and I am getting on in years. So very, very pleased to be here. The reason I will use some PowerPoint, though I teach with my teacher, Professor A.K. Jain, and he always tells students that PowerPoint has neither power nor point. Why don't you just get on with what you're going to say? But since we all have attention deficit disorder, I'm going to just use the slides as a bit of a crutch and give you some kind of just share some thoughts, and then I'm really looking forward to the questions. Now to do the challenge of the share screen, which worked 10 minutes ago, only now I can't find it. Okay, is the screen visible now?
Yes.
Yes, the moment of truth.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a marketing type, so I have to start with basically what I'm going to talk to you about is a little bit around the course that I teach, the work which is based on the work that I do. And it's an old book that's recently come out again with Penguin. It's called Customer in the Boardroom. That's the end of the plug from now on. So it has always surprised me at how little the customer is in senior management conversations about the business. The more senior you are, in fact, the less the customer gets discussed. In boards as well, which is really what the title of this is, while we use the word customer a lot, the customer view is hardly present. And it kind of makes me wonder, the other test I often have is that in which page of your strategy, business strategy document, does the word customer appear? Does it appear as it usually does on page 35? Does it appear on page 1? And I often ask companies, can you make a presentation to me without talking about your products? Just tell me about your customers and tell me about your business through the eyes and the lens of the customer. And in case, and off late, you know, it has been a little bit challenging in India because any kind of customer centricity has been a little bit like prayer. Prove to me that you will go to heaven if you pray, and prove to me that you will not go to heaven if you don't pray. And obviously it's pretty hard to do that proving. It's also because I think we've been in a time where we've had a lot of growth that has automatically come. So if you look at strategies, everybody says we want profitable growth. If you look at the strategies they talk about for profitable growth, one is be present. We have to enter this market. The other favorite thing is fill in the blanks product range. So we don't have these. If I'm a bank, then let's get mutual funds in, let's get private equity, let's get this, let's get that, let's get wealth management, let's get private banking. If you are a genset company, let's get big gensets, small gensets, etc., etc. I call it Star Wars. It's wider distribution, go where no one else has gone. So if you're an urban company, get into rural. If you're rural, get into deeper rural. You know, the other favorite word now, the new zamindari, is called partnerships. So if somebody has a cluster of partners, let's go and partner with that person. So it's all kind of go where no one else has gone to get business. I think increased operational efficiency is something we do very well. India Inc. has managed, even when your top line doesn't grow, to have your bottom line growing over consecutive quarters, and so on and so forth. When all else fails, go and buy somebody else, go into adjacent business areas. The closest we get to thinking about anything to do with the customer, the closest, and it's a long shot, is something called a brand. So there seems to be an assumption that a brand is some kind of, you know, voodoo magic around which suddenly growth will happen. But I often say that achieving your business goals of profitable growth, whatever cost cutting, whatever you need to do, cost cutting while not losing custom, requires customer cooperation. And I think that's really where I'm coming from. So if revenue is a business metric, revenue will only happen if you can persuade enough customers to buy enough of you and as often as you want in order to make up that number. If you actually don't do that, then it doesn't happen. Similarly, there is a cost is about the cost of giving the customer what the customer will accept. And I'm using the word customer, consumer, both interchangeably. There is a cost of supervising the whole operation, and the residual is the profit. I again see a lot of KPIs around market share. Market share, as I often say, is an arithmetic number. It's 1 divided by the sum total of whoever you believe is your competition. So as narrowly as you define competition, the better your market share is. I've often sat on boards of companies where they tell me the market is shrinking, but I have increased my market share. And I'm thinking, what's the customer reason for what's happening? If it's because your customers have gone on to substitute your category with something else, you should not be celebrating good market share. So I am firmly of the view that the demand side view of business can sometimes look very different from the supply side view of business. And very often, we always look at what is being bought. So if you say, when you ask people, tell me about your business, you will get told that these kinds of dyes, those kinds of dyes, this kind of gizmo, that kind of gizmo, this is what is being bought. What is being bought by whom would even be an improvement. But if you were to flip it and say who is doing what to fulfill that need, you end up with a completely different picture. And I think we've all had this experience over a period of time. So if you say I'm in the farm mechanization business and these are the tractors that are being bought, you get one answer. You believe the tractor industry is saturated, it's time to get out or do something else. But if you look at who, and that's the base of all the farmers who can't use tractors because they have tiny plots of land and not enough money, is doing what to fulfill the need of sweating your of not sweating your body, but trying to mechanize in some way, you end up with a completely different view of the world. Similarly, we're told forever that we used to be told in the past that scooter market is declining, motorcycle market is growing. But I've often wondered, is the need for family gone away? You know, how are families with the child standing in front, somebody at the back, how are they managing their lives? And if you do ask that question, then the answer can come back in the form of a revised scooter that Honda will give you. But who's doing what to fulfill need, to me, is the fundamental basis, which I don't hear enough about. I hear a lot about the market is declining by X%. But when you say, what is the market? I put it in inverted commas because we feel the market is run by magic fingers, right? So the market is declining at X%. GDP growth will determine my growth. When a company in toiletries and soaps tells me about GDP growths and the war in Ukraine, I'm thinking, people have baths when they, and that's when they use soap. So what does having a bath have to do with your GDP? You know, if we're managing to get more water and more taps, will people have baths more often? So these are the kinds of questions I ask. And instead of obsessing over a declining market, which you define in product terms, how can you, if you ask the question, who is buying, who's not buying, who's walking away, how can they be persuaded? You might come up with a different answer. And I could give you example after example, but I am cautious of the need for time. So let me complete my argument. The other thing I hear all the time is the market has got disrupted. It's like the market has magic fingers and got disrupted by some product genius or some company. But what really is disruption? If this is a value curve with benefit on one side, cost to use on the other, and this is typically the curve that is the line that is the industry norm. This much benefit you get for this much cost. A disruptor essentially will either give you more benefit at the same cost, or will give you same benefit at a lesser cost. And if the disruptor is really good, and that's what's happening, for example, in the logistics business. If you look at delivery, if you look at Rivigo in the past, if you look at a lot of these guys, you actually find that they're giving me far better benefit at a far lower cost. So disruption in terms of the customer view is about creating better customer perceived value. And if we agree that that's what disruption is, we will approach the whole idea of my market got disrupted a little bit differently. Similarly, if you look at the market opportunity analysis from the supply side, which is the sum total of the sales and the growth, industry attractiveness, classic calculations, versus the customer view, you may get very different answers. For example, I remember once looking at a durables chain, a retail chain for durables. And everybody concluded by looking at the numbers that, oh, there's no growth, it's a very competitive market. But if on the other hand, you say that the most important thing we all want today is to gadgetize our lives, whether you're rich or you're poor. And why is there only Vivek sales, Vijay sales? Vivek's is a small chain, Chroma's not really got off the ground. You know, is this a problem with the supply side not getting its act together, not having investment, not thinking about things? Or is it a problem with consumer demand? If you look at the park of durables we all have, everybody's ready for an upgrade. If you look at how many air-conditioned cars with no air-conditioned houses, I think we're ready for an upgrade. If you look at the number of us who are not allowed to talk on phones, why can't we have a hands-free in every car? I mean, you know, we can go on and on and on. But similarly, I find that if companies have had a bad time, like if you've drunk too much and have a hangover the next day, you've taken too much debt, you've messed around, that doesn't mean there is no consumer demand. So the assumption that company sales and how sales are growing is equal to consumer demand present or absent, I think is something we need to fundamentally look at. Everybody also wants blue ocean strategy. We love blue ocean strategy. But what is this blue ocean? It's again not a magic that comes out of somewhere. All my students tell me that the aim of strategy is not to get trapped in a red ocean. And I say, okay, can you make that sentence with customer in the middle? That's my favorite question. Of late, I'm getting slammed on feedback. They're saying, these are not nice questions to ask. But so I ask my clients or I ask my board that. And it is about identifying large, unserved or underserved customer groups and serving them. Nirma was the original blue ocean, right? You saw a large group of people who were being underserved and you decided you were going to serve them better, soap to detergent. Everybody wants to fly in this country. In fact, the other day I was looking at, can I fly to Pune because I can't do 4 hours in a car and come back 4 hours. I'm too old and I'm too tired. But there are not enough flights. And then we teach Southwest Airlines, which is about a lot of this stuff. So identifying large unserved needs or combining customer value spaces. So if you are in the market, as we all know, for education and for entertainment, to combine the value spaces and you have a blue ocean. But in order to do that, you have to fundamentally understand your customers. And so my guru god of strategy is this Japanese man who used to be a partner in McKinsey called Kenichi Omai. And in the book, Getting Back to Strategy, he says, the heart of strategy is not about beating the competitor. It's about adding value to the customer and avoiding the competitive battle altogether. Do read his hallmark article called Getting Back to Strategy, which we put as required reading all the time. It's fascinating. And so there is no tyranny of or. People say, should I be customer-centric or should I be profitable? I had a board colleague who's a wonderful man from finance who is to call me a bleeding heart consumer liberal. And I've often thought a lot about it. And I think it's about creating wealth for the company by creating value for the customer. That is the dharma of business, right? I create value for you. And as a result of creating value for you, I share the value that's been created in terms of creating wealth. That's really what it means. And in my journey to try and develop this thought further, we had a colleague called S. Ramchandar, who's no more. And that was the time also in the 80s and 90s when there was a lot of writing on how marketing can play a larger role in strategy. And he basically built out this framework that said that he called it the 3 levels of marketing thinking. And level 3, he called it the input function to business strategy, while level 1 and 2, which is what we understand as functional marketing, are the output functions. So very often when bully bosses, owners, promoters say, my sales guys have to go and drum up more demand, I think often you have to sit down and ask the question, is it an output function where I take your given strategy and you flog everybody dead to make it happen? Or do we look again at the market and say, if I were to take the input of what the market is telling me, how will I shape my business direction? So level 3 is the why and what of business direction. And that's where the core of my work is, reading markets to shape business direction. Level 1 and 2 are very important. It is the output function, taking a strategy and executing the business direction well in the marketplace. And I think this is a really, really big distinction. But I think this is a distinction that often doesn't get made in companies. And maybe that is also the role of the CMO to bring this input function into the market. So I've spent a lot of my life looking for what I call the Holy Grail. I started life as a market researcher. And I figured that if you take 2 variables, customer understanding and business understanding, the market research industry was high on customer understanding. It was very low on business understanding. Whether we research the market for Kellogg's or for Hindustan Lever or for Nestle or for Haldiram, we would do exactly the same research. Then I went into the consulting side and I found that the typical business and the global rockstar management consultants were very high on business understanding, very low on customer understanding. Market segmentation was not done from a customer side. It was a sprinkling of customer, like you sprinkle attar and you say, let's move on. And so I was saying, where is that space which is high on business and high on customer understanding? And that's really with help from my clients, from my students, from my teacher who I teach with, we thought about customer-centered business strategy as something that I have practiced in my consulting as well. I will quickly take you through some highlights of it. I'm conscious we are short on time, but to just tell you what is the sort of framework. It's a framework, it's not a formula. A framework is just a structured way to think about things. And we are trying to embed the customer, the market, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, deep into the strategy development process itself. So fundamentally, and a lot of people have written about this, business is a value delivery system. Don't think of business as silos of marketing, sales, manufacturing, but it is about promising a value to a set of customers, aligning your company to deliver that value, and communicating that value to the customer. So you choose, you align, you communicate. A lot of businesses choose a particular value, they align completely differently for other reasons, and they communicate completely differently. If you drive around Begumpet, there is a very interesting sign that says Pisces, specialty seafood, and Mughlai and multi-cuisine. And you're thinking, what was that again? What are you offering me? There are many businesses also so aligning all three, I think, is one tenet. And to me and to us, in the CBBS practicing group, the business strategy is, as we know, which paths to choose to reach your goals. And so we say the front end of business strategy is what we call a business market game. Where will you play in the market and how will you win in the world of customers? Now, where to play, how to win is very common, but where to play is often expressed in terms of products, not customers. I will play in sedan, I will play in SUV, I will play in X, I will play in Y. Play for whom? And how to win in the customer world will again be 2 gears, 4 gears, X genset, Y genset. Question is, what is the perceived value you bring? So you have to have a clear business market game. You have to have a clear ability to play it. And you have to align the whole organization to play it. If you are a business that says, I'm the cost leader, I will deliver you superior benefit at a lower cost, you will have to align in one direction. That's why people find it very hard to have 2 games played with the same organization. That's really a lot of the time we spend figuring it out. And the where to compete is very simple. Segment your market, look at gain and pain, don't play across the board, and decide your market priorities. But do you segment based on how customers see the world, or do you segment based on how you see the world? If you segment based on how you see the world, you will see it in product feature terms. If you segment it based on how customers see the world, you will start seeing pools of customer value and customer need. On the how to compete, so where to play, how to win, there is this thing called the rivalry proposition. Often companies tell me, I will win because I will do, this is my value proposition. But the point is not, this is mine. Why are you better than the next guy? Not because you think so. The world is full of companies who thought so and customers who didn't. But in the eyes of the customer, are you delivering more value? Different customers process value very differently. What is value to one is not value to the other. I think we know that very well. So do you deliver more value than your competitor? And do you do it because you have a real reason to do it? A lot of startups have delivered, a lot of startups, by the way, have done phenomenal blue ocean stuff. If you look at all of them, they have actually gone to underserved customers. They have been able to leverage technology. And a lot of them have actually provided services to people or disrupted them in terms of giving you better benefit at a lower cost than before. But an equal number of startups have delivered value advantage by burning VC money. So you have to do it because you have a capability or because you have a cost. And that's what I'm obsessed with, customer perceived value advantage. CPVA, we call it. Is CPV from me better than the others? What are the dimensions of benefit? What are the dimensions of cost? Value to me is sigma benefit minus sigma cost, as processed by consumers or customers who have an algorithm in their heads. So people say, oh, can't I educate the market? Of course you can. Change their algorithm, change the way they see your product. But if you can't do either, then you will be like Mother Teresa. You will be 85, you will be canonized as a saint, and you will probably be dead. So to conclude, I think because my other guru and mentor, C.K. Prahlad, used to call it the tyranny of or. And he said a lot of people are stuck in the tyranny of or, this or that, customer centricity or profit, growth or profit, inside out or outside in. So we're saying go inside out, go outside in, operate in the space in the middle. Doesn't matter how you hold your nose. As long as you're customer relevant, as long as you deliver customer perceived value advantage, as long as you use inside capabilities to make the outside value creation happen, it doesn't matter which side you start from. Sometimes you start from one side, get to the other. Sometimes you get from the other side and come back here. So in conclusion to this territory we're working on, I again just want to say that we're actually at level 3, which is the input function of reading markets, looking at meta trends to shape business direction. And I think that's where you start looking at mega consumer trends and start saying, what does this actually mean for everybody? One thing we know is that all of India is self-employed. There are very few people, except the 2 gentlemen I can see on the screen, who are getting a salary check every month. I'm certainly not. And when you're self-employed, if you don't go to work, you don't earn. Now, this has implications for the healthcare business. It has implications with regular payment insurance business. It has implications in 100 different directions. And so I think we're saying it could be simple, it could be complicated. It's no rocket science. As long as we respect that the customer is the person who makes our P&L happen, I think the customer will walk into the boardroom. So that's really my comments for now. I hope they weren't too bewildering, to 30,000 feet high. Happy to bring it down to any level that you would suggest. And let me stop sharing my screen.
That's amazing, ma'am. Thank you so much for putting it together for us. It is actually flying at the level that we have desired. We have set actually our expectations very high, given that you are going to speak to us. I don't want to waste even a minute by summarizing that, because it's pretty clear. The years of experience, decades of experience that you've had in dealing with various organizations and understanding the consumer or the customer, and the framework that you have developed, customer-based business strategy framework, is pretty clear. And I'm sure there are several application-oriented questions that we would like to have. I welcome Professor Mahendra Reddy, our distinguished advisor who has joined. I welcome Mr. Namburi Chandrasekhar, who knows you, ma'am, very well. He has also joined, and many other leaders who have joined. I'll take their names as we move forward. But I quickly would request Professor Prasad to come in and start cluster number 1. These questions were collected at the time of registration. All the participants have hidden. We have kind of landscaped this and put it in a proper perspective to raise appropriately those questions for your response. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Ma'am, this session is interesting for us because we take it as obvious that the customer is in the boardroom, but then you have actually highlighted the fact that it is not. So there will be a lot of interesting questions there. I'll start with this, ma'am. You have been on many boards. So if he or she, the customer, is not in the boardroom, where were they? I mean, in the spectrum of the organization, where were they, and how has this interface changed over the decades?
I think the customer is in the functional marketing area, so therefore is at the functional level, not at the strategic level. Comes in executing strategy, not in terms of inputting strategy. What has changed over time is that the talk of the customer is more frequent, in the sense we talk about the customer more often. But I'm not sure that our practices have changed. I mean, I think everybody should examine their own strategy documents of their own companies and see which page it comes on.
Fine,
so
ma'am.
clearly the golden great companies that we see, we read about the case studies, we talk about our companies that have, had customer focus, but customer centricity. A lot of companies have, okay, let me correct that also by saying a lot of companies have the customer centricity in executing a strategy in the market is very much part of discussion at senior levels, but reading a market as an input to business direction is not.
And you have been in a number of boards, many illustrious names there, and you would still say that, on the execution level, there is focus, and, at the board level, it is.
In fact, I would, when I'm using board, I would say XCOM, I would say strategy development organization. In the strategy development organization, I want to know how much input. I would definitely say that there is a very low input into the strategy. Strategy is all about, should I manufacture, should I buy, should I sell, geographical spread, product spread, but not customer value, barring a few.
So there's a lot to improve there, and I hope those listening in would be able to take something forward, particularly if it is their own venture. Ma'am, the next question. You briefly touched about management consulting firms, and they are, glorious. And isn't it their job? I mean, what do they do, and why so? Why didn't they get into this? Is there any reason? I mean, it should be obvious to them too. Could you delve on that?
Well, I think there are structural reasons. By the way, I have a daughter who's a senior partner in one of these firms, and she says every time you open your mouth, it's a career limiting move for me. But all the same, I will say, I think it's cost structures. If you seriously want to sit down and do a customer-based segmentation for your strategic market priorities, it's going to take 8 weeks, 10 weeks. Okay. If you're, let's say, particularly if you're a widely spread company, widely spread customer base. I don't think team time takes care of that. I just think that also the skills, I think the skills of the two don't actually get together in the same place. So when you talk to 4 customers and use it as a sprinkle, the question is that, in fact, use another metric. How much money do they seriously spend urging their clients to spend money on understanding the customer? I think they understand, because a lot of them also come from the microeconomic frameworks, right? A lot of strategies come from microeconomic frameworks. Industry, structure, conduct, performance. I'm saying look at customer-based structure, customer conduct and concerns, and customer satisfaction. That takes a little more time to put together. So
fine, ma'am. So the space is still open.
Yeah.
The next question is about the current spectrum, and you have seen that. How far are customer-related inputs available with the organization? If they are available, what stops these inputs from being discussed and decided on in the board?
I think so. There are different kinds of inputs available at different levels. So, for example, B2B companies, I often find particularly high value. They know the Janam Patris of their customers. They know exactly what the guy bought, what, etc., etc. But when you ask a B2B company that you go there and you talk to him about your business, have you talked to him about his business? What does he go to sleep worrying about? That's when we start drawing blanks, right? Or when you talk to an insurance company and say, why is it that in a country that's mostly self-employed, where all of us are set back with health expenditure, why is health insurance penetration so low? And if you don't get to the crux of that why, or given, and I have funny stories around this, which I won't go into now, but given that we're karmic Hindus, how much of insurance is truly protection? A lot of insurance companies have gone and done a lot of wealth management, and it goes as insurance because you have a life insurance license. So I think fundamentally the orientation and a lot of the inputs are not available. If you say recast your P&L in terms of customer types, not available. If you are a lending company or a bank, even less available. I think it's fundamentally not there, or is there to different degrees. So B2B companies have the Janam Patri, but they don't have the big structure picture till it comes back and bites you. Consumer goods companies don't have the big structure picture. I mean, for example, the simple thing, every company tells you that, they're all talking about Indian millennials and Gen Zs and so on. Firstly, I think our age cohorts are different, as I've written extensively. And secondly, India's youth is mostly rural and poor. That's where they are. The upper class, rich, urban are actually decreasing in number of children. Now, I think we have to be willing to face the reality, and then the rest of it will follow.
Fantastic, ma'am. So I think, again, the next question is centered around that. How do you move forward? I mean, in such a spectrum, or such a kind of a landscape, what are the ways to institutionalize this? I mean, what kind of methods you suggest that organizations adopt to this?
Yeah. So I think so far, as I told you, by playing fill in the blanks and geographical expansion and so on, I think people manage to grow. We haven't really had competition, right? I mean, think about it. We have one Indigo and we have one Vistara Air India and very little else in terms of reasonable number of flights. Yeah. I think that, and similarly, we talk about consolidation, but part of it is NCLT, part of it is this, that, and the other. I think when competition comes in, customer orientation will come in. Until then, it's like prayer. But I think what companies can do is simultaneously, right at the time when you're setting, where am I and where do I want to be, when you're starting your strategy or planning or whatever process you have, put some sense into your business plans. Not let business plans be all about how I'm going to get there, but why somebody else is going to cooperate with me to get there. I think in the strategy planning process, have two dashboards. One is your financial metrics, and at least in your KPIs, have some customer related KPIs that are not market share related. So everywhere where you have an opportunity where you're discussing business direction, have a module called customer, a presentation that says, this is my P&L as recast in terms of customers and not products. So I think that those are things that can be done, but there has to be the motivation. Right now, we're all doing very well. Thank you very much. We're in growth markets. Urban India is growing. We're the third largest everything in the world. So why bother?
Just a supplementary to that, ma'am. Now, if you look at the scorecard and you've written about this, and if you need to bring in some metrics or some way by which this can be articulated, what are one or two things which you would suggest?
So for example, in the scorecards that a lot of people use, where customers, one of the metrics, you could put in a serious level of brand perception amongst non-users. If you are looking at competition users and your users, ask yourself, where is growth going to come from? If that growth is going to come from non-users, and can we put that in? Evoke percentage of times I am in the evoked set of non-users. Or to say that I am, so for example, if I'm in the insurance business, then between the insurance as wealth management and insurance for true protection, at least break the two out and say, how am I doing in this space as compared to this space? Have customer segments there and say that this is the targets I want to hit in every one of those segments, stuff like that. The who element, not just how much increased rural penetration. I mean, half of India's rich live in rural India. So what penetration do you really want to increase and amongst whom?
Immensely doable, but then I come back to I think it goes back to the previous question and what is stopping people. Yeah.
Motivation, zarurat nahi hai right now. It's like prayer. I mean, even if you look at the vision statements of companies, by the way, I just looked at it the other day for something. If you look at, there's an Amazon and there's a PayPal and there are a bunch of very customer-centric companies and there are a bunch of other people. And there's a difference between what do I do for you versus look at me, see how wonderful I am. I mean, the high-tech companies that say, I want to be the most customer-centered company. As a result of you being the most customer-centered company, uska kya kalyan hoga? What do I do for you? Starts right there.
Again, since you mentioned large organization, this brings me back to the Jeff Bezos statement about the customer in the boardroom. I mean, you would have studied, obviously, you would have studied Amazon. To what extent do you think that is implemented there?
I'll tell you, in India, I am continuously amazed. Okay, I also, another crusade I have, I go to war with multinationals who want to transplant strategies and bring them here, expect them to work. But if you look at Amazon's merchant, and I always say that, why can't you bring your core competence and apply it to my country? Amazon's the only one that's figured out, I need cow dung for pujas, and you can get them online. I need 5 varieties of mixer grinders. My mother's idli dosa is not my mixer grinder in my kitchen. If I want a Juda pin, they figured out how I fix my Judas. And the micro detail, I mean, that there is red rice, there is black rice. They know that rice is not rice. And there's no 80-20 rule being done there. So even if you just look at the simple merchandising, I mean, someone has actually applied mind to figure out, people say, oh, it's a marketplace model. A marketplace model doesn't create customer connect and merchandising. It's just a question of choose the value, deliver the value, how you're going to deliver that value. Yeah. And I think that's, and I think before they came, you could not return anything you ever bought, right? So if you say values benefit minus cost, I love them. And there are enough places where we don't use them as well, where they don't deliver value. So I think the Indian consumer is pretty sensible. They have a computer that processes things extremely well, very counterintuitively, and benefit minus cost is equal to paisa vasool.
Excellent, ma'am. So finally, we've got a name and somebody we can study who's doing this and perhaps look at what can be done.
Lots
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You were saying something?
I said lots of people are in patches and places, and I think it's certainly very, very interesting. Yeah.
The last question in this cluster, ma'am. Now, if you take it from the investor's point of view, so many startups we claim to be, third largest in terms of the size of investors. What are the investors looking for? And there has been a trend among ventures to go for high growth without bothering too much about profits. I mean, that seems to be the signal which is coming up, valuations, etc. So what actually are investors looking for?
So I think it's always good times and bad times, right? But by the way, if you think about customer centricity, just look at the other day, I analyzed the 100 unicorns and the 154 supposed to be Sunicorns from the list. And it is quite amazing how many of them have actually identified customer needs and gone after them. And I used to find it in the dot-com era as well. And I used to wonder that how come they're doing it while marketing companies aren't? I think very simply, they come without any religion of marketing. As like I find that the best marketing customer-oriented problem solvers are the R&D guys, because they are problem solvers by nature and they understand R&D. So coming back to your investor question, I think investors in the minute times go bad, I think then they start looking at that famous phrase, path to profitability. When you have a path to profitability, I think they go through cycles. There are times when it's growth, growth, growth. So we see reflections of that definitely in boardrooms when you start, I personally don't think we should be doing what the market wants us to do, that market wants us to do. But there is also a sense very often that now it's no longer reckless. If you're buying your market share, if you're buying your growth, if you're buying it at the cost of your negative margin, I'm hearing more talk now on unit economics don't work, which is actually quite good news, which basically says that you've got to prove to me that you can be profitable and that whatever money you're going to burn has to go back in a sensible way towards sustaining your growth and profitability. So I think it's changing because post-corona, things are bad. Now, if things start going Yahoo great again, then again, the market will start looking, you'll see P ratios that go crazy because they're punting on growth.
Fantastic, ma'am. I think you have further situated this concept and also given us good examples of where it is not yet there and where something is beginning to happen. Thank you very much. We come to the end of this cluster. I hand it back to Professor Rao.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We are enjoying it. And as you can see, I'm rushing into it. I want to not forget one important thing. Mr. Vinay Kamath is here, whose book you have launched
yes.
back. So we welcome Mr. Vinay Kamath from the Hindu Business Line joining this evening. Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining. Ma'am, you've been a practitioner, you've been a consultant. So one question around that is, how do we develop this customer-centric culture in organizations?
I used to have a boss who was the chairman of Hindustan Lever who once told me that, Rama, the only way to learn to take decisions is to take decisions. So I think whenever there are decisions, so, if you're doing an M&A, even if you're doing an M&A, talk about what the benefit you're going to have through integration of customers is going to be. So I think everywhere, wherever there are decision points, bring in the customer view. I think that's what top teams have to drive, right? When people say, let's do, even it could be simple thing like, let's do cost optimization. I think there has to be an orientation to say, where's the benefit coming from? Whose cost are we? Why are we cost optimizing? What will happen to the other guy who's buying? So I think everywhere, starting from goal setting, 2 sets of dashboards. Again, boards, don't just look at financial numbers and say, acha usne acha kiya. Look at business health and look at financial numbers. Look at business health in terms of market position. So I think it's like, I'll tell you the mental picture I have is that it's not like a playground separately and a separate tent called customer centricity where you tell everybody go play there for a while and come back. It's more like if you've ever had an intravenous drip, they put many medicines into the drip, into the big drip. There I would like customer centricity dripped. So it drips through the veins through every decision.
Amazing. At all decision points, bring in the customer view, and that should be centric to the organization's behavior and various decision-making processes, and not a separate tent, as you mentioned. So good. The other question, probably one of the participants is planning to understand is, Ma'am, will the differences between rural semi-urban consumers and the urban consumers reduce drastically in the years to come? What is the trend like?
It has already reduced very, very significantly. I think you have to look at income. You know, we hate looking at income in India because income numbers are so depressing, right? 5th largest economy, bole to acha. 132nd rank in per capita income, bole to acha nahi. So I think that half of India's rich live in rural India. They could be living anywhere, rural, semi-urban, peri-urban, whatever. Most of India's poor also live, now urban poverty has also come up a little bit, but a significant chunk of India's poor live also in rural India. Do they have the same aspirations? Do they have the same requirements? Do they have the same exposure levels? I would say yes. But do they have the same amount of money? I would say no. So in fact, I've been tracking income levels. I've been tracking urban and rural income levels, and I'm finding that there is a very large mass market of almost 150, 200 million at the base of India's income pyramid, which spans rural and urban. And I am of the view that the good news for us is that there is a mass market at last, which spans urban as well as rural. So the top ends, if you look at it by income, you will find everything else is pretty much the same, which is why when we say, oh, tier 2 towns are growing, tier 3 towns are growing, I mean, there's no magic about the tier of the town. It's just that if you're a rich person in Satara, now you don't need to go running to Mumbai for everything. And so you relocate to Mumbai, you live in Satara and you get rich.
Amazing. I think we should look at the income pyramid and then understand. So therefore, the third question is around this. Is it the customer segmentation first begins with urban and rural, or this consumer segmentation in India is agnostic to whether it is urban or rural?
Okay, so I'm going to say this about segmentation. Apologies for being pedantic. I think segmentation is not something that is in the market that you uncover. It is something that you do, right? It's like cutting up a cake. The knives that you use to cut it up are the variables, and the cake is the cake. Now, if you are, let's say, a company let's say, I'll actually take names like a Nestle or an Imami or whatever, which has been largely urban-centric. And you're saying with distribution expansion to the richer parts of rural and the census towns, which is where our urbanization is happening, I can actually take my products and just merely expand distribution and grow. I'm saying then urban rural is a good urban and selective rural. I segment in terms of emerging rural, developed rural. Developed rural is almost like tier 2 towns, same amounts of income, same amounts of sophistication. And then there is the completely underdeveloped rural. Now, that is the reason why you segment will determine the basis of segmentation. If, on the other hand, I'm a car manufacturer, a marketer, and in any case, most of the car market is really in the top 10% of India, forget about 20% of India. And there I'm really looking at where are all the rich people, and if you are there, I need to understand by road patterns. So if rural roads in many states are better than urban roads, then I think as they actually are. I mean, Marine Drive has potholes, okay? When I drive rural Maharashtra, rural Karnataka, I haven't driven rural Andhra that much, the roads are fantastic. Rural Gujarat, the roads are fantastic. In which case, then I don't need that segmentation at all. But I do because they're long distances, therefore the Innova Cristas, the SUVs, etc., etc. If somebody funded taxi companies properly, I think we would have a lot more demand for people to drive rather than fly in any other direction. Reverse of Southwest Airlines.
That's a great opportunity when you make that comment. Somebody had funded taxis, would have had a greater opportunity or more people traveling by roads. In fact, the rural or the suburban roads within Telangana and Andhra are actually very good.
They're very good, right? Yeah.
Very good. They're very good. Your Sangli Satara towards Bombay is amazingly good. Your Delhi to UP and the hinterland is amazingly good. So is Telangana and Andhra.
Gujarat, you drive Ahmedabad to Somnath, you're like on a roll. So so therefore, why rural urban is a good question, right? Rich people want cars, travel long distance. So maybe travel patterns is what we have to look at as segmentation variables.
Correct. I request the participants to raise their hands in case they have any questions. I'm sure they have forgotten to raise their hands. Given the speed at which The bullet train has been moving. So don't forget that your questions are there. Please raise your hands and we'll open the mic for you. In the meantime, I'll take one more. Ma'am, there's another question. Hasn't customer centricity lost its relevance when there are tools available to mold the opinion of the customer?
What tools are available to mold the way I think? You're talking about social media. You don't get to control social media. In fact, I was reading a very interesting thing the other day about the Silicon Valley Bank, somebody's Twitter, it was all over WhatsApp, someone's Twitter trail. And they were saying that there's a new source of risk that should come into risk matrices of banks, which is how quickly opinion can get shaped, which is, and how it gets shaped. If Peter Thiel believes that the bank is about to die, then the bank is about to die. 10 people will retweet it. And on the other hand, how quickly money can move. And they say the combination of the two is actually a risk that you need to think about. So yes, opinion can get molded quickly, but you as a company don't get to mold it. So I think we're saying instead of my grandmother, today it is Twitter. And I think we're also saying that all the more reason why you have to track it, because it's moving and moving very, very fast. But a lot of opinion also, I think we're all in echo chambers. So we're all in echo chambers. So we only get to see opinion that resonates with our own opinion. So we're not actually getting to see the big base of customers. I think that's all the more reason for customer centricity. So I don't think companies get to shape opinion. I think it's got democratized. In fact, that's why it's influencers now. There's no longer Amitabh. There is Amitabh Bachchan, but I think the influencer has as much influence as Amitabh Bachchan when it comes to buying jewelry. That's my view.
Great. That's a great point. These opinions are moving fast, changing fast, and I think we need to track them. That's the take-home message. There's one specific question from Mr. Srinivas Rao. He says, when Maruti 800 was one of the most successful people's car in India, why Tata's Nano failed to attract customers? Is it because of the Tata failure in estimating the customer psychology, or it is because of bad marketing strategy?
Yeah, I always get asked about Tata Nano, and the short answer is I don't know. But I would think that if you looked at customer perceived value advantage, benefit minus cost, I'm not sure the Tata Nano, it also came at a different time. I think when Maruti 800 came, if you remember, there were no cars that even looked halfway decent, right? It had Ambassador and Fiat to have customer perceived value advantage against. I think Nano had to create customer perceived value against a much wider, a much better competitor. And, you know, when we say bad marketing strategy, I mean, what does that actually mean? I think it just means, so it can either mean that the benefits of Nano were not properly conveyed to the customer, or that at that price, you know, customers process value differently. The short answer is I don't know, but I will give you another example. One day I remember doing research for a two-wheeler company, I think it was TVS or something. And we found that the lower income, the low priced vehicle, the low priced, lower feature vehicle called Boxer was actually selling, or it was Boxer or whatever, was selling more amongst the rich. And the higher priced, higher feature vehicle was selling more amongst the not so rich, the lower income, relatively. And of course, the first thing we did was look to the data and said the data is hogwash. But when we looked a little more carefully, we found that there was a 60% overlap between car and two-wheeler. I don't know how many of you know it. 60% of households, of people who have cars also have two-wheelers. The car is for status. The two-wheeler is for my own going to office and coming back. Car is to take my family out at weddings. Now, if you have only that two-wheeler, your status comes from that two-wheeler. My yoga teacher actually pays a premium. He would be SECC, actually pays a premium for getting the latest two-wheeler in, because he wants the brand to be current for a long period of time, and his entire source of prestige comes from there. So that's how people process. So I presume it has something to do with the way Nano got processed. Now, is that processing because information was not correctly conveyed, or the consumer algorithm in the consumer's head was not correctly understood? I don't know.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you very much, ma'am. There. So there's one more interesting question, and the more we listen to you, the more we understand. I mean, I need to admit how much more distant we are from the customer view or the customer perspective. We talk about it all the time. We kind of admit that, but in our practice, somehow in the busy schedule of making things happen, it is not even in page 5. I think it comes probably somewhere down the line. So there is a scary reality, and it is hitting us that we realize that the customer is actually nowhere. Although we talk about it, we preach and as like a prayer. It's always there like a prayer, but in execution, it's not there. The other question is, ma'am, about how to retain customers in spite of increasing the price of your service or product.
So again, there's one very simple mantra I have, which I get from the customer. Customers will choose that which they think gives them better value. Simple. No customer will choose that which gives him or her worse value. Now, value is benefit minus the cost of use. Very often, we don't understand how value is processed. If you are increasing the price, the benefit minus the increased price still has to be paisa vasool. Otherwise, you will get some people for whom paisa is not vasool. So I would say if you're increasing the price, now again, it depends. We used to have agonizing discussions in the same two-wheeler company about increasing price. But if you talk to customers and say, how do you process price? He's looking at how much EMI more per month. Okay. Similarly, no one's looking at interest rates at that level. I mean, if you are just someone in my staff just now took a loan from an NBFC, and everybody else was hyperventilating about the interest rate, and I said, "Tum mahine mein 5,000 bhar sakte ho?" Haan. 10 साल के लिए भर सकते हो? हाँ. तो वो जमीन खरीद लो. बस बात खत्म. So if you're increasing price, I think you have to also look at how people process the price and whether benefit minus price still gives you paisa vasool, or try and increase the benefit in some way. That's what you call value up, right? So premiumization people talk about. I mean, what is premiumization? You want people to opt for higher benefit at a higher price. And if you're raising price without benefit and people feel that the advantage compared to your competitor is not good enough, you will lose people. There's nothing you can do about it.
Amazing. I mean, it fits into the framework now. If benefit minus the price increase that you have done, is it paisa vasool or not, in your own words that you mentioned?
And the way I look at price increase is cost of usage is what I could be looking at. It could be cost of EMI, it could be anything.
It could be anything, yes. Then I request the members, Mr. Chandrasekhar, would you like to ask any question? You can raise your hand. I'll open the mic for you. But in the meantime, there is an interesting question here, ma'am. This is about your experience. You had a huge experience of being on the boards as an independent director. I don't know how you will respond to this. How to deal with disruptive behavior during board meetings? I'm using the question verbatim.
Usually it's my disruptive behavior others have to deal with. So I'm not, but I would really say if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. If you have disruptive behavior, if you have behavior that is disruptive and is not allowing business to proceed, firstly, examine for yourself whether there is reason for that disruptive behavior or not. If you believe it's unwarranted, go and tell the chairman, it's your job to manage this board. You're not doing a good enough job of managing the board. Go manage it better, right? If you know the person well enough, call the person out separately and say, you know what, can we just figure out how to make this more peaceful? And if none of it works, get off the board.
It must have been very difficult for all these boards with you, ma'am. Very tough, I guess. You actually tell it on their face, and I'm not saying that you're aggressive, but I'm saying you were very tough. So I can see that. Thank you. But yes, there are some tips that you've given us in terms of talking it out, hold them separately, and then explain how we can have peace and how we conduct these boards. I think the question is well answered for the participant who raised that. The next one is, ma'am, about is it necessary for each department in an organization to have its own social media strategy, social media initiatives, so to say?
Yeah, if you want to, but the question is, is everybody's social media, it's like a rag or an orchestra score. I mean, is everybody in harmony, or is one guy doing Malkos and another one is doing Bhairavi, in which case you'll have a problem, right? It is the same question I used to get asked in the past for multi-business companies, that can, if everybody's doing their own advertising, if you take a Philips or a GE or whatever, they have a range of businesses, right? So I saw a very interesting thing from some overseas advertising consultant, where they created a showreel of the advertisements of all the businesses, and the amount of time that was given in that showreel was proportionate to how much money they had spent, that business. So you got a showreel that was weighted in terms of money, and then as you look at that reel, you will see, is there harmony? Is the orchestra score right? Is it the same rag, or is it jangly and disjointed? So by all means, I think everybody can have their own social media strategy as long as you are conveying the same message. You don't have to say the same thing. Are you singing the same rag? That's the question. One may do an alap, one may do a drut, but it doesn't matter.
Amazing. I think it's the harmony that one has to bring about in the communication, irrespective of having separate arms to manage your social media initiatives for each and every department. But are we talking in unison? That's extremely important, apart from focusing on the specific goals of that department that was in question. Great. I am actually tempted to ask this question, ma'am. The question is, in a world where increasingly this is talked about, a large number of these executives who join these organizations, both mid-level and senior, they all come from very good business schools, most of them. And they all understand what is the importance of customer view, customer value, and things like that. But we also see in the same organizations, some of them ending up, especially in service, which is visible. They end up beating the customer also sometimes. They lose it out. An airline, for example, what has happened, and it stays in our mind for a long time. Where did the things go wrong? I mean, forgetting at one level, bringing the value of customer into your boardroom and strategizing it carefully is at one level. At another operational level itself, instead of keeping quiet or instead of not acting adversely, one has acted adversely and beaten up the customer in the glare of media, and then a lot of other things that were consequential to it. Why do these things happen? And I have seen many videos also of like, not big brands, even small brands, in hotels, in service outlets. There's an aggressive conversation, and trying the waiters or the service people and executives, they're trying to cut the customer to size. At that level, at that ground level, probably they were trying to set the equation one level, but then with their bosses, with their team leaders, all experienced in some of the best case studies that we taught and we learned in our business schools, why doesn't it translate into action, ma'am?
Good question. Let me apply customer centricity thinking to this. I had a professor called Professor Mote, and one day I was very frustrated with my class. And he said to me that what their parents haven't managed to do in 20 years, he said, Rama, you can't do it in 6 weeks. I think we are talking more broadly about, in this case, human values, about anger management, about entitledness, about ability and resilience to be able to handle frustration, about the art of dialogue. And I think at one level, I will really say that this is, I think, a larger reflection of the society that we're in. And I think it is what it is. At another level, I know also that when that Cobra post happened, if you remember right, which was really fraud and cheating, the CEO of one of the banks picked up one of the older, more senior managers, very much older, and said to him that go and figure out why this happened. And he actually went and talked to a lot of people. And I think the answer very simply was aggressive targets that are set, unreasonable targets that are set. You're really asking people to cheat. Now, I have seen, for example, how quickly culture changes when you have outstanding CEOs who understand culture change. And essentially, one day I said to this CEO that, hey, can we do a culture study to figure out culture? And he said, figure out culture change. And he said, culture change ki baat nahi hai. I've just shut off sales of these 5 products because they're toxic for the customer. And I have understood the potential in every pocket of what the products are. And I do not permit and I do not permit targets beyond that particular number. He said automatically culture sorts itself out. Over a period of 6 months, I found that he was right. Even when you talk to the lowly branch manager in a particular place, that person says, I'm much more comfortable doing my job now because I'm not being asked to square a circle. So I think somewhere between the two, I think between the unreasonableness of the kind of targets. So for example, I also know a tire company owner who actually wanted to do a seminar to figure out how to double the sales of his tires. It so happens that there was recession. When there was a recession, trucks don't move. When trucks don't move, tires don't get worn out. You were the king of the replacement market. Replacement nahi hoga. So there is another case for embedding the customer into your business strategy and say, this pond is dried up. What's the other pond I can get my money from? And I think when you don't do that and you flog people, I think it just increases anger levels. But it is true that our society is also getting far more, even if I've driven from place A to place B in unbelievable traffic, I take out my road rage at home, I think. I yell at my dog when he's standing in the doorway and I trip over him.
In fact, what you mentioned is a statement of reality across many dimensions, at work, at the society, in our life itself. Yes, but that's as you mentioned, ma'am, that's a bigger question. We all have to deal with that. But right leadership, either at the family level or at the organizational level, will definitely bring the culture change. And there are examples where it has been done. We have wrong examples also of aggressive target setting leading to all kinds of things. It can happen to any organization, not just financial services organizations, but it can happen to even product organizations. It can happen to education organizations. It can happen to IT, everywhere.
And don't promote people who display toxic behavior. That's easier said than done. If he's your star performer, she's your star performer and is delivering you stellar numbers, and there's a whistleblower complaint about not nice human behavior, that's when organization culture comes into play, right?
Right. I think it is more to do with the leadership. Everything else will align probably with some concerted action at the top level when we are talking about the crucible of culture.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you have looked at several organizations, and I have noted each and every organization that you looked at. The only one organization in your entire list of clients, which is from education, has been your alma mater. That is IIM Ahmedabad. That's just an observation. My question is, what is your suggestion for educational institutions, how to bring about customer centricity or student centricity? These things have been changing quite faster, and while lots of these higher education institutions deal with the 19 plus to 23, 24, 25 kind of a very prime age group. This is the age group probably majority of the service and products are vying for or wooing about. How education institutions, in the wake of the competition that's going to come from foreign universities setting up shop in India, will have to wake up to this student centricity, customer centricity. How do we achieve that in education?
Actually, I was also on the NIBM board, by the way, the National Institute of Bank Management. I don't think I knew enough banking to contribute meaningfully, but also doing something with Nalsar just now.
Okay.
I think I've seen 10 years of the IIM Ahmedabad board. I've been on 2 of their committee for future direction. I think about it. If you are a faculty governed institution, then I don't know that you can mandate. I think there's a fundamental difference in how academic institutions approach strategy, should approach strategy and growth and everything, and how business organizations do it. And I think when we have business organization chairmen and board members, we have to continuously remind them that, hey, these institutions operate differently. I mean, growth comes, as one of my colleagues called it, biologically. It's like a plant where if you have to burst forth with a flower, you will burst forth with a flower. I don't think somebody can decree and say, at least not in some kinds of institutions. I mean, I certainly know that in many of the IIMs, you can't do that. Somebody can't turn around and say, okay, now go and teach this course and now go and do this. You can't. You can only have very strong processes, and you can have, again, a culture of honesty. So for example, if you're finding, I still get I teach the same course forever. I try and change material every time, but we agonize over ratings every time. And there's always the pressure between I want to play to the galleries and dumb it down to get my ratings. I want to be the nice person versus, which is when my teacher, Professor Jain, always tells me, Rama Ben, reminds me of my dharma, which is that you're going to have to do what you believe is in the best interest of the student. Eventually, customer centricity or student centricity, as Hector Rose of AMD once talked about customer centricity, it's doing everything you do on behalf of the customer, not doing everything the customer wants you to do. So I think as long as culturally we want to do everything we want to do on behalf of the student, and you have to have shared values. For example, if I believe that I'm in the business of teaching problem solving and independent thinking, and not giving a bunch of tools, and that's how my institution will be. Choose the value, deliver the value, signal the value. If you have confusion along the way, you have confusion. But eventually, I think if it is peer run, there has to be a shared values and a shared culture, right? But when there's not, you see everybody going down the tube. It's frustrating.
Yes.
It is frustrating. There aren't that many degrees of freedom. We don't make all that much money. You know, yes. I always think it's marvelous for how less paid faculty in a lot of educational institutions are, how much they churn out. India's biggest export is middle management, who've gone on to be the top. I mean, how did they do it? How did they do it getting paid as little as you did? How did a handful of IITs and a handful of IIMs go on to have such a high market share of global leaders? How does it happen? That's what I would love to have a PhD student work on.
Great. I think I would like to bring in Professor Prasad here, who has handled all kinds of segments of customer within education, within ICFAI again, over the last couple of decades. I think in this context of figuring out what as ma'am has rightly put it, what the student wants vis-a-vis what is best for the student. I think we think more like a parent, we think more like a value adding agency, we think more on behalf of the customer or the student here, and therefore we take certain initiatives. But there's bound to be some gap till these students understand this. I think when they become alumni, they understand, not while they're on campus in front of us to a large extent. I'm talking about the entire spectrum of education institutions that are available in the country, not just the top few. In your view, Professor Prasad, what's been your experience in dealing with a different kind of a student at your level, maybe about 10 years, 15 years back, and now the online education that you are primarily charging for?
I think I'll use the same principle. In fact, it has been a usage of the same principle. You need to know what your customer is looking for, what he's capable of, what he's not capable of. So it's not the top segment of the cat who come, a lot of students across the country from so many colleges, whether good or bad, they are there. And it is the job of educational institutions to take them forward and place them nearer to the corporate opportunity. And whatever that opportunity is, which suits this person's background, competency, and add value in the bargain. So you need to move that value chain, and that's the job of educational institutions. If it's an affiliated college in a district, that's the job. If it's the best of institutions, that is the job. But the learner profile is very different. So in many cases, you have people who are self-driven. They will, even if you don't have a faculty, they are the guys who will go and get recruited by the best of institutions, particularly in the best of institutions. But then you have this rest of the rest of India where you got this major issue, and there, if you don't know who your customer is and what you can do, if you try to ape the best of institutions, including what NIRF does or NAC, and say this is the best of institution, you try to follow that, you got so many points. Now these guys will try to game it, which won't work. So we need to have something which you think to your heart that this is what works for this kind of students, for the kind of institution, the kind of resources that this institution draws. Because there will be limitations in finance, there will be limitations of the kind of talent available in the neighborhood, and you need to live with all this, and then you need to design your program, which includes the faculty, the type, etc., and see how you can deliver on that. That would be an appropriate value chain, whether it is, a Mofussil business school, or whether it's an online MBA. These principles will hold, and I'm sure they'll hold in MA psychology, etc. So that kind of thinking needs to come in.
Choose the value, deliver the value, signal the value.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Into that framework. Yes.
Based on who it is. Yeah, that's true.
That's amazing. I think I also would like to add here that Professor Prasad was heading a division at ICFAI, which had MBA taken to the doorstep of various cities and towns in this country, almost as 160, 170 MBA colleges, and we used to call it ICFAI National College, and we ran that experiment. We did very well for a few years, and then that served as bellwether for us to establish large format universities. We have now moved into large format universities. We have 11 of them across the country. And huge, I'm sure you know that, ma'am. So I think
your growth has been extraordinary, actually. We run little boutique places, but your growth has been truly extraordinary. And
thank you, ma'am. I'll cut this part of the video and use it for my advertisement.
I'm sure you can get better testimonials, but yes, I absolutely stand by it.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that. But the lesson, the point that I take home is go for the learner profile and cut it as per the resources that are available. And every institution has its own job cut out for that particular profile. I think that's the takeaway. That's amazing, and it fits into the overall consumer-centric business strategy that we have been talking about the whole day. And there is one question, one hand that has gone up, and I want to, here comes my good friend and your friend, Mr. Namuri.
Yes. Hi.
Can you please unmute yourself, Mr. Chandrasekhar? He has been a huge motivator. He always supports me from behind the scenes, and for these conversations, today we are on 97th, but at least 10 conversations, he has recommended some good guests. And but I also want to tell you, ma'am, that he did not recommend your name.
Although I've been following you for the last probably a couple of decades, I've been reading every book of yours. So right now, actually, when Sudhakar sent this across to me, I told him I'm reading your book. I'm on the 50th page of your book.
Okay.
So I have 3 questions to ask to spare time. One is, Reliance has announced major initiatives into the FMCG space. What will be the impact of this on Unilever and P&G, since you also, I think, were associated with them at some point of time, either in MR or on the board?
Mm-hmm.
2, you talked about a very interesting concept of analyzing and understanding rivalry competitive value proposition. I never heard this earlier before. This is something that, and the third question I have is your prologue headline. Why bother with strategy in a hyper growth environment? Is strategy really necessary, particularly when everything is selling everywhere, to somebody or the other? 3 parts: Reliance, rivalry competitive value proposition, and hyper growth environment. Our strategy is relevant.
Right. So let's start with the last one. Yeah, I think what's happened in the hypergrowth environment, I often tell people, it's like if you have a lot of rain, it's the size of the bartan you're standing with that determines how much rain you will catch. You don't have to know, here's the rain, there's the rain, this is what I have to do, this is cloud seeding I have to do, there's no problem. And I think that so for example, you notice every time there's a downturn. So now what people are doing, every time there's a downturn, they'll say the government is to stimulate demand. And I often tell them the government of India is not your marketing director. Go find a marketing director. So I think that we've gotten a little bit used to this incessant rain, and all you need is a bartan. I don't think it's going to change in a hurry, sadly, because right now rich India is really taking off, because post-COVID also you found the rich have got richer. And so if you are dealing with the top 20% of India, then you find that they're getting richer and there are more of them and they are spending more. And so you don't really need very much of a strategy there. It's a little bit sad, but I think as competition increases or in markets that are competitive, we will see more strategy, right? If you look at the telecom industry, if you improve your network quality, you will automatically gain market share. I mean, most of us now have to bet on where the network is bad and where it's good. The Reliance one, the Hindustan Lever operates in a fraction of product categories, right? I mean, outside of detergent and soap and a little bit of toiletries. So if Reliance is going to, how they're going to play, we have to figure out. It is not always necessarily true that everybody competes with everybody. So for example, does Jio compete with Airtel? If you put a customer lens on it, it doesn't. Maybe not as much. Or if they end up wiring up all their Kirana stores, is that Airtel's game? No. Is that Hindustan Lever's game? Hindustan Lever will continue to grow. Hindustan Lever has always been very selective about what it does, more so now. I don't know that we will get another Fair and Lovely brand that exists only in India from Hindustan Lever. So I'm sure, again, if you put a lens of what are people buying and who's buying, I don't think that there's going to be that much competition at all happening. I think that they're playing the business market game I talked about. It's my sense that they're playing different business market games. Maybe a little bit of collateral damage, but not a whole lot. That's what I feel. And your middle question was, yeah. So
concept.
it's a rivalry proposition that you have, because everybody says I will win because I am trustworthy, I am cheap, I am good quality, I am sensible, but so is everybody else and his wife, right? You talk to any NBFC and they will tell you that we are going to do this lending, we're going to have good credit appraisal, you're looking at your cost of credit and so on and so forth, but so is everybody else. So I feel now that when people say this is my value proposition, I think, stop and say, no. I want to know, what is your rivalry proposition, right? And I think that's an important thing to do. So it really says customer perceived value, advantage over the next guy, which in the old days we used to say, who am I? Why buy me? So why buy me and not the other guys? All I've added to that statement, which I think is a good discipline to have.
Amazing conversation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chandrasekhar, for raising those pertinent questions. Thank you, ma'am, for your response as well. I have one last question. Based on this movement of customer centricity and bringing customer into the boardroom, into the strategy, some of the examples that we remember top of mind is basically organizations like Tata Motors, Kotak Mahindra, Asian Paints, Mahindra and Mahindra, or Titan. They have these customer advisory boards or councils, whatever be the name, and they start having this kind of structure to elicit feedback and pass it on to the other stakeholders, and then they take the suggestions very seriously. Ma'am, in your experience, how are these things actually working out towards the desired goal of bringing customer into the boardroom? These are only structural postures, or these do help or not?
Depends, I guess, on what you do with them. I mean, very simply, you can't take the organization to the customer, you have to get the customer to the organization. I know many other ways in which this works. For example, I know at one point in time, there was a particular company where the CEO said, everybody's going to spend 15 days or 10 days in a quarter in the field, okay, in the market. And I need you to come back and file your market reports. And I don't care if you're my direct report or somebody 13 levels lower. For example, when I started my career in advertising, of all things, I lasted for about a year in that. Alec Padamsi used to tell us to go and see Hindi movies, and you had to submit the tickets of the movies that you went to, because that was the biggest source of consumer insight in those days. Okay, I also know, I think it was Hindustan Lever, I'm not remembering right, where I think one of my friends there, who was one of the directors of personal products, told me that they actually met every so frequently, and everybody had to do X number of customer interviews and come back, senior management. And you had to divide it up into backed up what I already knew, some fine tuning, but directionally okay. And oh my God, it shook the foundations of everything I believed in. And you had to actually come back and talk to the group on these counts. Now, customer councils are one way of getting the customer into the company. And if that's the only way management will listen, that's fine. I think it's much nicer if the company goes to the customer than for the customer to come to the company. But on the other hand, C.K. Prahlad has written a lot about co-creating with the customer. He calls it like experimental theater, where the audience is pitching in with lines. So I think if it's a co-creating kind of situation, why not? It's pretty good. So whichever way you do it, just do it, right?
Whichever way it is, do it, take customer views into consideration. I'm sure the leader who has joined from Kotak Mahindra is happy about that response. I think he would have put out that question. Thank you so much, ma'am. There are, I have exhausted the questions that I have, and I have a belief that all the members in the audience, very, very surprisingly to me, have not asked much of the live questions. Only one person has gathered the guts to ask the question, but otherwise a large number of them have not. This is pretty unique. This masterclass is fantastic because we have in you a practitioner, consultant, and an academic all put together, and it ran super like a bullet train, as I mentioned. I have thoroughly enjoyed, and as much as I have, I'm sure all the members around the screen today have enjoyed this conversation. Loads of takeaways. I'm not going to waste any more time by highlighting a few, because there are layers and layers in each of the slides that you mentioned, and the takeaways are pretty huge. But holding Bartan to catch the rain will stay on top of my mind.
I have loved this session too. Thank you very much for such active participation. It's been a really good Friday evening. It even almost beats Netflix today.
Fantastic. We thank God that it's Friday, and we thank you for making our Friday as valuable as it can be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you. I will get in touch with you. I'll request you to share your PPT if you can. We'll write a summary.
Sure. Absolutely.
We'll write a summary and also share that with you before we publish it on the.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
From running educational institutions, educational programs online, to distance learning, to Mofussil towns, to urban-centric business schools, to large format universities, to writing cases that the world sits down and takes note of. We have had a good journey of 37, 38 years with feedback and insights and support and good wishes coming from leaders like you, ma'am. On behalf of everyone at ICFAI, I want to actually thank you so much for making this evening so valuable.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Good night, everybody. Thank you all.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next Friday. Mr. Adit Rangnekar, former Dean of ISB, is going to talk. He's going to talk about the research and innovation and what Telangana should do. He's just messaged to me and he's waiting to speak to us next Friday at 6:30 p.m. Do come back and we will enjoy and learn together. Thank you so much. Good night.